Thank you for joining us for the Promoting Inclusive Online Pedagogy, which is the next in our series of our Saluki Online Sessions. My name is Dr. Susan Wegmann, and I'm the Executive Director of SIU Online and Extended Campus. We also have one of our wonderful instructional designers with us, Leticia Velasquez, and we're going to talk to you today about inclusive online pedagogy. There are a few things I kind of wanted to set the stage, set the tone for. First of all, welcome. Very glad you're here. Um, I wanted to carve out what we're talking about with inclusive online teaching. And really, we're taking the broad definition of inclusivity. So when we talk about, in particular, different learners, differentiating factors, we're talking about things like, physical, mental, emotional, even things like racial or gender, or all of the range of differences that our students come to us with. And so what we decided to do is take this nice broad approach in that we know what's good for some is probably going to be good for everyone. And so first I wanted to take just a minute to define what is inclusive online teaching. So as you know, there are several ways that we can teach online. We can teach online synchronously at the same time. So you set up a time that all of your students can meet together, and maybe it's like, I don't know, Monday at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Everybody meets same time. The instructor is there. Usually that instructor delivers a lecture or a talk or some sort of activity, and then the students are doing their thing. You can also have an online course that is asynchronous in that they're not there at the same time. And so the course is open maybe a week at a time. Some courses open from the very beginning, the entire course is open. But so we're talking synchronous, asynchronous, and then also this lovely space in the middle that I happen to really like, which is hybrid. And that is that some pieces of the course is synchronous and some pieces are asynchronous. So kind of want to take a minute, define that, and define inclusivity. And what we mean by that is that this beautiful space of recognizing and designing courses that accommodate all kinds of learners' needs. We also need to ensure that there's accessibility and engagement for all students. We may build in beautiful engagement pieces, but unless the course is accessible, it's not going to make much sense, right? And so we need to make sure that accessibility and engagement are both there. And so today we're going to hear a few ideas in that regard for accessibility and engagement. And then finally, we want to reduce barriers. We want to make sure that we are doing this before the course goes live. I think we have an ethical responsibility actually to all of our students to be able to include them no matter what they are, no matter what they bring to the table. I come from an elementary education background, and that's a very, very big piece of that, in that we accept everybody and we learn to work together. And I realized when I got to college teaching, sometimes faculty members don't have that same approach to teaching. They feel like, the student's kind of on their own and they have to learn it, and it's up to them to learn the content. And I want to push back on that a little bit to say that we need to be proactive in that. Another thing that I wanted to carve out is this idea of UDL, which is short term for Universal Design for Learning. So it is a framework. There are three main principles of UDL: representation, engagement, and action and expression. So you're going to hear those themes all the way through the rest of this presentation. But UDL is a framework to improve and optimize teaching. And again, I want to emphasize the word all. So it's teaching for all students, no matter what they come to the class with. And it proactively removes learning barriers. And this is one way to do that. If you're thinking about UDL and you're thinking about, ways to do that, one of the best ways to do that is to reach out and to look around us to the help that's available on campus. And one of our biggest resources, I was going to say best kept secret, but they're not much secrets, but our instructional designers, the Center for Teaching Excellence, is a wonderful center on our campus that has a lot of ideas, both face-to-face and online. And instructional designers are housed in the Center for Teaching Excellence. So I've asked Leticia to help tag team with me today on this presentation because I feel like she has some information that is really important for this discussion. So Leticia, why don't you take it from here for a few slides?
So UDL is extremely important in online teaching. It's not even important in face-to-face teaching as well. UDL supports everybody. So you are designing to be inclusive, and then while you're doing that, it's going to benefit everyone. That's the main idea behind UDL. Is yes, I may be focusing on one group of people, but it is going to benefit multiple. The big thing with using UDL in your online teaching is it is going to help meet legal requirements, which Susan can talk on more. But more importantly for me is it's going to enhance your students' success and engagement. It's going to have students be more interested in your class. It's going to give them a sense of belonging, and that's going to increase their desire to be engaged in your course. So for designing content, one of the big aspects of UDL is providing multiple forms. Ideally, what you're going to want to do, like in an ideal world, picture perfect, is you would be able to provide students with the same content, but in different formats. So you would have a video that they could watch that would give them all the information that you need for a specific topic, but then you also provide a different article or a podcast that they could listen to that's not necessarily tied to the video, but also still gives them the exact same content that they would have got if they watched the video. That's ideal. That's not something that's necessarily achievable for everybody. So you still want to do your best, though, to provide multiple forms of content. You don't want to give them simply, the only thing they do in this class is read. And here's a 40-page article, and next week you'll get a 15-page article, and the week after that there's a 7. Like, they need different formats. Find a video that's still going to supplement your content. Find audio that's going to supplement your content. When you're designing that, the thing that you also want to look at is the use of captions and transcripts for those videos. Some people don't necessarily have the time or desire to watch a video, but they can read through the captions or the transcripts. And along with that is also including alternative text for any images that you put into your course. When you are in designing for engagement, you want to give people options. And those are really, really important for students, that they get to kind of choose their own adventure. How do they want to interact? So for example, discussion boards. You can give your students the option of replying via text. They can go ahead and type out their introduction. Or within D2L, they could use the video note. And they can go ahead and record a short introduction and just talk to people. And that's going to create a sense of community within the class because they're getting to see each other. Along that same lines is a lot of students nowadays want to know why. Like, why am I taking this class? Why does it matter? It was like that even in high school. Like, when am I going to ever use trigonometry? Why do I care what the circumference of a circle is? Why does that matter? So providing them real life examples in your coursework is going to reinforce that engagement and is going to make them want to participate more, because it's something that's going to matter to their future careers. It's something that's going to matter to their community. It's something that they care about. So making sure that you include some of those real life scenarios into your course is going to be really, really helpful. And along those lines of trying to prepare the students, you want to also encourage them to have self-reflection, because that's metacognition. Like, what are they learning? How are they learning? Why does it matter to them? And then setting goals for the course is also an important aspect of that. Again, going with designing your course, you want to have like I mentioned before with the discussions. You can have them do a text-based, but you can also have them do video. The same way goes with your assignments. If you are having your students, study about the Crusades, you can have a student who prefers, written essays. So maybe you offer different options. They can go ahead and write an essay on the Crusades, cite all their sources, or you can have a student who does a presentation in class. You may have students, because we're looking at everybody globally, who may not be comfortable giving presentations. Maybe English isn't their first language. Maybe they have a speech impediment. Maybe they just have crippling anxiety and they don't want to talk in front of people. And by forcing them to do that, you are like inadvertently making them hate your class. Like they don't want to be there. It's worst class ever, worst experience ever. So by giving them multiple options, if they are a second language learner, but they're like, I got this, let them do the presentation. It's an option for them. If they're super like anxiety ridden and they just want to do the paper, then let them do the paper. But they still have the same sort of rubric. They still have the same expectations for what they're supposed to be demonstrating in their learning. They're just given different avenues to present that. Along the same lines, adaptive learning, adaptive assessment is something that's really, really cool, but something that can be tricky to do, especially if we don't have the correct tools. D2L gives us an option where we can kind of like fake adaptive assessment. And it's something that I would encourage you to use. When you have quizzes, you want to use low stakes quizzes. Especially if you're doing like review for a test, you can go into D2L, you build your quiz. It has an option for giving feedback. And then you can tell the student, like, the answer C, they selected B. Unfortunately, this is incorrect. Go back into the lecture and start at, minute 2.5, and here's a link. And that way they can go back and they can review the content that they missed and then retake the test and see if they can, find the correct answer. Low stakes is really, really helpful, and adaptive learning and adaptive assessment gives that immediate feedback and it lets students go back and review what they've missed. Along that it's providing scaffolding. You're giving your students the chance to grow and to build by making things easy at the beginning, where failure is not necessarily like the desired outcome, but it's an okay outcome. It's okay for them to go ahead and fail those low stakes assessments. Maybe they're not graded because they're learning and they're building a stronger foundation. The feedback that you can give in, the low stakes quizzes, the feedback that you give them on their homework as they progress, building the scaffolding is going to make sure that everyone feels included and feels supportive. A good example of building scaffolding is if you have a new tool in your class, use the tool for like introductions. Let's do class introductions using this new polling tool. So that way students can play with it. If they mess it up, it's whatever, it's not going to hurt their grade, but they're getting familiar with the tool. They're learning how it works, how it doesn't work. And then when it comes time later in the course for them to actually need to use that, they'll have a better understanding of the tool and won't have the anxiety that comes with not knowing how the tool is going to work when it matters. One of the big things that the university is pushing, that the US, who knows what they're doing, pushing, is accessibility with the changes in Title II. So accessibility is very, very important in your online course. And it's not even just accessibility with the sole focus of making things accessible for people who have disabilities. Having accessible content in your course is very, very important just for everyone in general. D2L has features to help with accessibility in the course. There is a accessibility checker that'll go through it. We have screen readers in D2L that's going to be helpful. So those are big things that you want to use. Like, use the tools you have. The Center for Teaching Excellence has a training that you can go through that talks about accessibility. If you don't want to do the fun gamified training, we also have resources where you can read through and it'll tell you exactly how to use D2L to make your stuff accessible. One of the big things that even in-person faculty run into a lot is the color on their screens and such. If you are in person and you hand your students a piece of paper, some professors I've seen will use color highlighting to like signal things to students. Students who are colorblind might not be able to see that. But when you translate that into online, sometimes the colors actually make it worse. You still have the issue with colorblind, but you may also have issues with contrast. So make sure that you're bolding, you're using italicizing. You don't really want to underline for online, but you want to use your other tools, not just color. And that leads into more accessibility. When you're creating your PowerPoints, when you're creating your readings, when you're creating your handouts, make sure that you're using the headings and structures that are in D2L. It not only helps with screen readers, because that's why it was initially like created, but it also helps for students to be able to like jump around and navigate in a document. In Word, I'm not sure if you were aware, but you can open a side panel that will show you all the headings and you can jump through a document that way really easily. So students don't have to scroll and scroll to figure out what they need. They can use the other navigation tools available within Microsoft or Google. You want to ensure that you're providing your students with clear instructions and that those instructions are universal. You don't want to use terms and language that are too technical or too, specific to your field of study. Because sometimes students aren't in your field of study and they're coming in because they've got to take this class because they need to check a box. And if you use terms that are too technical, you may lose students. So there's no reason to like flex your smarts in a way. Because the point is you want to make it a welcoming environment. And you may be leaving some students out who haven't either been exposed to those terms. It could be something colloquial. It could be something like, you're a PhD, they're a freshman student. They're not going to necessarily know all the terms that you know. So make sure that if you are using terms like that, like how we used UDL, that you are defining that for them from the get-go. And we've already talked about the high contrast. That's something that's really hard with PowerPoints. Okay, it's not something that's hard. It's something that's often missed in PowerPoints. Faculty, the PowerPoints that I've looked at, the contrast isn't necessarily great, especially if you're using some of the design aspects in PowerPoint. There are tools online that are free and that can check your contrast to make sure that your students can see your document. Because I have absolutely been in presentations where even if it's huge on the wall, I can't read it. And it's because you can't see the difference between the contrast. So that's something to keep in mind when you're creating your presentations.
That's really good. And before we get on to this piece, Leticia, would you put the CTE URL in our chat?
Yeah.
Box? Thank you for mentioning CTE's resources. We also, I'll tell on myself, we were doing this presentation, what was it, 2 days ago, and Leticia said, are you going to share this PowerPoint? And my thought was, well, yeah, I mean, I'd share whatever we have. Well, she said, but it's not accessible. And so she showed me how to do, it's under the review tab, check accessibility. And then on the right-hand side, it showed that all of these, pictures, images needed the alt text because they were text on the picture, the way that it was created. And it wasn't, I mean, it took me maybe 20 minutes to do everything that needed to be done, but I thought, you know what, that's low hanging fruit. We should all be doing that. So the accessibility checkers are something that I learned this week. I also wanted to say, and you mentioned the guidelines, we are under several things according to our accreditors. One of them, we have NC-SARA clearance. And what that means is it's the National Council for State Authorization Reciprocity Agreement. So NC-SARA, and that means we can teach online outside of the state of Illinois. We've agreed with all of the other states except California, but we're figuring out how to work with them as well, that our students can reside in all 50 states. So because we are part of SARA, we agree on what they call the CRAC guidelines. There are acronyms everywhere, but those are the 20th century or 21st century kind of update on technology. And part of that says that we will provide education and provide our coursework that is ADA compliant and that will follow UDL principles. And so we are promising that we're doing that. And so one of the reasons why I wanted to do this presentation, first of all, it was a faculty request, so that's always awesome. But then secondly, I know because of our NC-SARA accreditation, we've agreed that we are doing this. And so we need to make sure that we're doing this. We're also held to the higher standard of ADA, and then that's the American Disabilities Act, but then also our HLC accreditation, boy, acronyms falling from the sky today, Higher Learning Commission, and they are the big accreditors. So they're the ones that can shut us down tomorrow. But HLC also has a piece in it that agrees, or that we agree, that we're following UDL principles. And so that is really important. If you're interested in any of those acronyms, or if you want more information, please don't hesitate to reach out to myself or Leticia, and she can get it to me, or she may know it herself. But let us know, and we're happy to point you in the right direction. I also wanted to say AI is quite interesting. And when you're talking about adaptive learning, I've seen some amazing prompts that will mimic adaptive learning. And depending on how, so you as the faculty member actually write out this long prompt, put it in your syllabus that's electronic, and you have the student take that, copy it, and dump it into just the Chat GPT. And in the prompt, you say things like, wait until I respond. And then if I respond, they start out by saying something like, you're an expert in basket weaving. And, tutor me on how to weave the cat's eye basket weave. I don't even know if that's a thing, but, and then depending on how the student responds to the tutoring questions, the AI can then say, okay, you responded this way, so I'm going to give you this prompt. But you responded this way, we know we can move on. And so AI has come so far in the past 2 years, and it's going to go even farther. And that's a whole other topic of discussion. And we'll do ongoing presentations on AI as well. If you're not familiar with Notebook LM, I highly recommend. That's an AI tool that you, as the subject matter expert, have control over the resources that an AI agent uses. So it's helping you develop an AI agent. If I were teaching in the classroom right now, I would have a Notebook LM set up for each of my classes. Right now, it's free, so that's a good thing. They're probably going to monetize it at some point. But right now it's free. And again, if your topic is basket weaving, and then you find all of the resources you want your students to use on basket weaving, you feed it into this Notebook LM, and then students can interact with that. And it gives a wonderful way for them to learn about the content and then engage with the content even stronger. So adaptive learning is really being helped out. So I wanted to talk a little bit about assessment and designing those assessments. I liked, Leticia, thank you for bringing out this idea of low stakes assessments and high stake assessments. If we can provide them formative assessments along the way to check their understanding that are pretty low stake, then they're going to do better if they listen to your feedback. They'll do better on the high stake assessments. And so you need to design assessments that align with UDL principles and that of accessibility, that of pace, and those things that really matter when the students are learning something brand new. And then you've said it a couple times, Leticia, and I completely agree. Providing multiple ways for students to respond is key. Now, you can't do that in every course, but you can certainly highlight it when you can do it. You can make it accessible. So I did also want to talk about regular substantive interaction. And RSI has become kind of a hot topic in the past few, I'll say, years. The Department of Education, depending on what it looks like in the next years, has been focusing on regular substantive interaction that sets us apart from correspondence courses. Back in the day, remember, you mail in your answers and they give you a grade based on your answers. And so there was little to no interaction between the faculty and the student. Well, regular substantive interaction says that we will engage with our students on a regular pace, and it will be about substantive issues, and it will engage the students. So it'll be an interaction back and forth. So it's things like asking a particularly interesting question on the discussion board related to the class, having the student answer, and then the piece that makes it RSI is when the faculty member gives feedback. So it's that interaction around the content that's really important. And that fits right in with what UDL principals would say are having to do with engagement and making sure that we are engaging. And the communication online needs to be inclusive. And so regular substantive interaction follows all of this, setting clear expectations, fostering a respectful and a supportive online community, and then providing timely feedback and constructive feedback. All of that is wrapped up in that RSI idea. And here at SIU, we're recommending one RSI per week. And that is whether you're teaching a synchronous course or an asynchronous course. So it gets a little trickier when you've got asynchronous going on, but you can certainly do that. So I do want to take a minute and talk about the second piece here, fostering a respectful and supportive online community. I know that for some students, gaining the floor in a face-to-face course is not a problem. They're out there, they're, the extroverts of the world, and they're excited about answering, their hand is up and they're going. But the thing that I really like about the online course is that it almost levels the playing field for a lot of students that are dealing with disabilities. They're dealing maybe with a very quiet personality, and I shouldn't say but students who are also dealing with developmental delays, things like that. We can set up and be proactive about making our online courses very supportive. And so for example, students don't have to gain the floor in a discussion board. It's expected that they will answer. And really that's their way of gaining the floor. And we see it in a different way, but the piece that I want to focus on is this respectful piece, and I think this is very appropriate in our time right now. But at any time in our culture, we've had to remind ourselves to be very respectful and to have a zero tolerance on things like bullying, name calling, those kind of things. Because I hope you've never experienced this, but I've had several large classes that just, the students were not trained in this, I guess, and I had to give them very quick discussion board etiquette notes and had to shut down some discussion boards because students were frankly calling each other names and they weren't being respectful to each other. So that's something that we really need to watch. If we give a discussion board in particular kind of activity, we need to make sure that we're monitoring it. I'm absolutely not suggesting that we have to reply back to every response, because if you have a large class, that's going to take you forever. But if you, again, and Leticia mentioned this too, if you're using a new tool, another example of this, you need to make sure that you're on that tool and you're monitoring what students are doing on that tool so that it is a respectful environment and it's supportive community. And that all, of course, relates to providing timely and constructive feedback as well. So some of the tools, I mentioned AI before, but AI-based captioning seems to have a higher accuracy rate. YouTube 3 years ago, YouTube captioning used to be at about 90%. I think it's a little higher. I don't know. Those of you that use YouTube more may have some more information on that. But you can imagine 90%, even though that's high, I think that's still problematic. I would want 100% transcriptioning accuracy. But AI tools are helping us with that. We've talked a little bit about adaptive learning, and we should have probably started with a definition. This is when the actual learning changes and evolves based on the student's replies and based on the level of the student's knowledge. And so it's that classic, choose your own adventure. I think Leticia mentioned when you reply in a certain way, the learning goes in a certain way. The responses come back at the student based on their response. So leveraging adaptive learning platforms, again, I connect that greatly with AI since I've seen it demonstrated. It is powerful. And you can ask the AI 13 times the same question and it won't get mad. It doesn't care. And sometimes if you ask the faculty member the same question multiple times, they tend to get a little, I get a little spicy about it. And I think, well, why didn't you listen the first time? But the AI doesn't care. So that's another really good use of the AI tool. And then interactive elements like polls and quizzes and those other software that Leticia was mentioning, those make engagement really, really interesting. And they allow you to be inclusive of a lot of different aspects of the student that, otherwise you might miss. So consider using those as well. And Leticia, I think I'm going to pass it back over to you to talk about overcoming some of those challenges.
So implementing UDL, just the same as implementing accessibility in your course, unfortunately, is not easy peasy. It is going to take a little time up front, but the payoff overall is going to be there. Some faculty, unfortunately, don't necessarily want to put that time up front, but to make sure that your class is accessible, that it is welcoming, you got to do a little bit of work for it. We have resources. The center's got, resources. Google itself has resources. You can drop in questions in AI, and it is really good about giving you different ways in which you can overcome the challenges. So definitely reach out for support. We are a member of OLC, so that's the Online Learning Consortium. So as a member, your faculty can get discounted courses. They have a lot of courses on UDL on accessibility and how to build that. And you can get discounts on those courses if you have some like professional development money, or if you just want to go ahead and, do that for your own learning. Those are going to help get you the training and the knowledge you need for things you may not be familiar with. As far as time constraints, don't try and do it all at once. That's what I tell everybody. You're trying to make your course accessible, do not try and do it all at once. If it's not something that you are familiar with and that you're constantly thinking about, to where it becomes second nature, like Susan had said with the PowerPoint, I was like, it's not accessible. I knew it off the bat. I could tell from the beginning because it's something that I'm constantly doing. But it's not necessarily something that she had considered because she had used the program to generate the slides. And she's like, why didn't it do it by itself? So yep. Those are things baby step it. Maybe, this semester you focus on, adding captions to all your videos. Then you focus on restructuring this. As far as UDL, you focus this semester on giving your students, additional options on 2 assignments. They have, a choice for 2 assignments. Maybe next semester you go ahead and throw in multiple, videos. They have to watch the video or they can read the article. And you slowly baby step your way into it so that over time you are developing a course that is more welcoming and more like more engaging for students. UDL isn't just about accessibility, although that is a huge part of it. You also want to look at providing students with, multiple perspectives. So again, for my example for the Crusades, maybe instead of having, primary sources that are from the European perspective, what if you throw in some perspectives from the Arab, like from the rulers of that time and how those people were dealing with the effects of the crusade? Not only are you bringing in multiple perspectives, but if you have students who identify with that region, being heard and being seen is such a powerful thing that it helps bring people together, and it would create a very interesting discussion. One of the things that, was said a lot when I was growing up is history is written by the winners, but that doesn't mean that the losers didn't write anything. Like, they have their own perspective, they have their own understanding of the situations, and including those different perspectives is going to hit more students. It's going to make them feel like they are a part of your class instead of being an outsider. So baby step it, figure out little things that you can do to make big changes and big impacts in your class.
A couple things just to wrap this discussion up. I love the way that you were couching that last discussion about benefiting all students. These are just really great practices, and they're really, really good ways to get across information. And so inclusive teaching benefits all students. And small changes can make a huge impact. I love that. Baby step it, and never being closed off to new ideas helps as well. So start by applying one thing. And I wanted to give you one of the tools that I think is the best kept secret of our campus, and that is LinkedIn Learning. We have partnered with them for free accounts. It's not free, but it's free to you as a faculty member. And those accounts, LinkedIn Learning is amazing. In fact, they've got a lot of information about UDL, but you can go through and you don't need to have a LinkedIn account. You can have one though, and it will post badges onto your timeline when you finish courses. But you can learn so many things, a spectrum of ideas. You can also gain certifications. You can learn about the minutia of whatever, and then take that back to your classroom and take that back to whatever you're doing in the field. So I just wanted to throw that out there. LinkedIn Learning is there. And we're going to shut down the recording. Thank you so much for being here today. Thank you for allowing us to talk to you a little bit about promoting inclusive online pedagogy. So I'm going to sign off. Thank you.